For 6 years in a row, the most respected business magazine in America called this the most innovative company in the country. And they were right. There really was an innovation at the heart of Enron. It just was not the one anyone thought. In the year 2000, this company reported over $100 billion in revenue. It was the 7th largest corporation in the United States. Its stock was worth $90 a share. And here is the strange part. Almost nobody could tell you how it actually made its money. Not the analysts who rated it a buy. Not the reporters who put it on their covers. Not even the accountants who signed off on its books. They all sensed they were missing something. And they all decided that the something they were missing must be their own stupidity. Because surely the smartest company in America could not be lying to their face. That decision, made by thousands of clever people at once, is the whole story. This is the rise and fall of Enron. It did not begin as a house of cards. It began with steel in the ground. In 1985, 2 old pipeline companies merged, one from Houston, one from Omaha. Together they became Enron, and their business was about as unglamorous as business gets. They moved natural gas through thousands of miles of buried pipe, from the wells where it came out of the earth to the homes and factories that burned it. A quiet utility, a boring, dependable machine. At the top of it stood a man named Kenneth Lay. Lay was not a wildcatter or a roughneck. He had a doctorate in economics, and he believed in something that was sweeping through Washington at the time: deregulation. For decades, the price of energy had been set by the government, slow and stable and dull. Lay was convinced that if you set energy free, if you let it be bought and sold like any other commodity, there was a fortune waiting for whoever moved first. He spent lavishly in Washington to make that freedom happen, cultivating politicians of both parties, and one by one, the old rules came down. He was not wrong about the fortune. Enron had the pipelines. It had the political connections. What it did not yet have was a mind reckless enough to see just how far the idea could be pushed. That mind was about to walk through the door. His name was Jeff Skilling. He arrived in 1990 from a top consulting firm, brilliant, impatient, and completely bored by the idea of owning pipelines. Skilling had a different vision. Why own the gas at all? Why own anything heavy and slow and real? Enron, he argued, should become a kind of bank. Not a bank for money, a bank for energy. A producer who feared prices might fall could lock in a price with Enron. A factory that feared prices might rise could do the same. Enron would stand in the middle of every deal, making a little on each one, owning almost nothing. It was Wall Street logic dropped into the middle of the oil patch, and it worked. Enron became the largest trader of natural gas in North America, then the largest trader of electricity, then a trader of almost anything you could put a price on: weather, internet bandwidth, advertising space. It launched an online trading platform and handled tens of billions of dollars in deals through a web browser, and it loved to describe itself with 2 proud words: asset light. Owning things was for dinosaurs. Enron owned ideas. The men who ran it were told they were the smartest people in any room, and they believed it. The company's own culture demanded it. Every year, the lowest-ranked employees were simply fired, a brutal system the staff called rank and yank, and the survivors competed to book ever bolder deals. And the outside world agreed with Enron's opinion of itself. Wall Street analysts pleaded with clients to buy the stock. Business schools taught Enron as a model. Fortune magazine named it the most innovative company in America, not once, 6 years running. To understand what really made Enron run, you have to understand one accounting trick, because that trick is the entire empire in miniature. In 1992, Enron won permission from regulators to use something called mark-to-market accounting. Normally, a company records profit when the money actually arrives. If you sign a 20-year contract, you count the cash year by year as it comes in. Mark-to-market let Enron do something else. The moment it signed a deal, it was allowed to estimate the total profit that deal would ever make across all 20 years and book that entire imaginary sum as profit today. On paper, right now, this quarter. Think about what that means. Enron did not have to earn money to report earnings. It only had to sign deals and guess. And who chose the guess? Enron did. If a deal looked shaky, they simply assumed it would turn out wonderfully, and the wonderful number became this quarter's profit. But there is a trap hidden inside this magic. Once you have booked 20 years of profit today, that deal is finished. It has nothing left to give you next quarter. So next quarter you need a new deal, and a bigger one, to show growth. And the quarter after that, bigger still. Mark-to-market did not just let Enron lie. It forced Enron to keep lying, faster and larger, forever, or the whole illusion would stop growing and die. There was still a problem, and it was a big one. Behind all those glowing profits, Enron was hemorrhaging real cash and piling up real debt. Building power plants and fiber networks around the world costs money, and many of those bets were losing. If that debt ever showed up on Enron's books, the stock would crater and the whole machine would seize. Enter the Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Fastow. Fastow's job, as he understood it, was to make the debt disappear, and he built an astonishing solution. He created hundreds of shadow companies, partnerships with strange names like Chuco and the Raptors, entities that existed on paper and nowhere else. Enron would quietly shovel its bad debts and its failing investments into these partnerships so that they vanished from Enron's own balance sheet. To anyone reading the annual report, Enron looked clean, rich, growing. In reality, it had simply moved the garbage into a back room and locked the door. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. Fastow ran some of these partnerships himself, sitting on both sides of the negotiating table, buying from Enron as a private investor, while also being the Enron officer who set the price. He paid himself tens of millions of dollars for doing it. Enron's board looked at this obvious conflict of interest and formally voted to suspend its own code of ethics so the arrangement could go ahead. The fraud was not hidden in a safe. It was described in dense and deadening language, right there in the public filings. They were betting that no one would admit they could not follow the words. For a while, the bet paid off beyond anyone's dreams. Between 1998 and 2000, Enron's reported revenue exploded from about $30 billion to over $100 billion. The stock climbed and climbed, peaking near $90 a share in the summer of 2000. Executives cashed out hundreds of millions in shares. Skilling and Lay were treated like visionaries, invited to advise presidents. Enron put its name on a brand new baseball stadium. Its lobby had a giant banner that read, "From the world's leading energy company to the world's leading company." And out in the real world, the cost of all this arrogance was starting to land on ordinary people. In California, Enron's traders learned to game the state's newly deregulated electricity market. They invented schemes with names like Death Star and Get Shorty, deliberately choking the flow of power to drive prices up. The result was rolling blackouts across California. Families and hospitals plunged into darkness. An entire state held hostage so a trading desk in Houston could squeeze out a better price. Years later, recordings of those traders surfaced. On the tapes, you can hear them laughing about stealing money from, in their words, poor grandmothers. To them it was a game, and they were winning. That was the company at its peak. Adored on Wall Street, advising the powerful, booking fortunes it had not earned, and joking about the people it left sitting in the dark. Every quarter, the reported numbers had to be bigger than the last, and by now the gap between those numbers and reality had grown into a canyon. Something had to give. Illusions need momentum, and in 2001, the momentum stopped. In February, Skilling finally took over as chief executive, the job he had wanted for years. 6 months later, in August, he abruptly quit, saying only that he was leaving for personal reasons. The man who built the machine walked away from the controls just as it began to shake. That same month, an Enron vice president named Sherron Watkins wrote a private memo to Ken Lay. In it, she warned that the company might implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She could see the back room, and she knew the door would not hold. It did not. On the 16th of October, Enron reported its first quarterly loss and quietly revealed a $1.2 billion hole in its own value, tied to Fastow's partnerships. Once investors started pulling on that thread, the whole garment unraveled. The hidden debts came into the light. The credit rating collapsed. A rival called Dinergy offered to buy Enron, looked closely at the books, and fled. The stock that had been $90 fell to 20, then to 1, then to pennies. On the 2nd of December, 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy, $63 billion in assets. At that moment, the largest corporate collapse in the history of the United States. When a giant falls, the people crushed underneath are almost never the ones who built the thing. Enron employed more than 20,000 people. Many of them had been encouraged to pour their retirement savings into Enron stock, to believe in the company the way the company believed in itself. When it collapsed, roughly $2 billion of their pensions and retirement funds evaporated, and there was a final cruelty. In the last weeks, as the stock fell, the company had frozen its retirement accounts, so ordinary employees were forbidden to sell even as they watched the value drain away. Loyal workers in their 50s and 60s watched a lifetime of savings go to zero in a matter of weeks, at the very moment they lost their jobs. Meanwhile, the executives at the top had already sold their own shares near the peak, walking away with hundreds of millions while telling their staff the stock was a bargain. The wreckage did not stop at Enron's doors. The company's accountant was Arthur Andersen, one of the largest and most respected auditing firms in the world, the referee whose entire job was to catch exactly this kind of thing. Instead, as the scandal broke, Andersen employees fed Enron documents into the shredders. The firm was convicted of obstruction of justice, and a company that had stood for nearly 90 years, employing tens of thousands, simply ceased to exist. One lie had reached out and pulled down its own guardian. The reckoning came, slowly. Ken Lay was convicted of fraud and conspiracy, but he died of a heart attack before he could be sentenced. Jeff Skilling was sentenced to 24 years in prison, later cut to 14, and walked free in 2019. Andrew Fastow, the man who built the shadow companies, cooperated with prosecutors and served about 6 years. In the wake of it all, Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, rewriting the rules for how public companies are audited so that the specific tricks Enron used would be harder to repeat. But the deepest lesson of Enron is not written in any law. It is this: the fraud was never really hidden. It sat in the annual reports and the earnings calls, in language designed to make you feel foolish for asking. Thousands of intelligent, well-paid, well-meaning people looked at Enron and quietly thought, "I do not understand how this makes money, but everyone else seems to, so it must be me." The single most expensive sentence in modern business history is not a lie somebody told. It is a truth nobody was willing to say out loud. I do not understand this. When no one can explain how a company makes its money, that is not a gap in your knowledge. That is the answer. Enron did not fall because it stopped innovating. It fell because its only real innovation was a new way to hide that it was failing. If this story held your attention, consider subscribing to Toppled Empires, where we tell the stories of the giants that were too clever, too proud, or too blind to survive. Because every empire believes it is the exception, and every single one of them is wrong.